Verse 2, this is pretty straightforward, and it's marked as a quote in most scripture. God is in the council here, and he says to them, "How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked?" And the line's marked with a Selah there at the end. That's a pause. It could be, we're not sure exactly what it was, but there was a musical pause, pause for contemplation, given sort of the change of topic. I think you're supposed to stop and think about this. And so, oh, I need to back up too. You mentioned Elohim has a very diverse range of meanings. I said this earlier in Hebrew, some of these words can be diverse. You get them paired up so that you can clarify meaning. That's a very common thing in Hebrew. It seems like they're repeating themselves. They want to make sure you know what they're talking about. I don't want to correct Mr. Golden Gate too deeply because I think he knows a lot more than I do about this. There is actually one instance in the Old Testament where the word Elohim seems to refer to a human person in authority. It's in the law. I'm blanking on the passage, probably Leviticus, maybe the end of Exodus, but it's where they're talking about customs and a slave is what they say is like a bond servant. When that bond servant's debt is up, they're supposed to be released. They have the option to stay in the household, at which point the master is supposed to take them to a doorway and pierce their ear. Right? That's the thing. In that, I believe it's the master is called Elohim. That's actually the word used for it there. And if it's not the master, it's supposed to be sort of a reference to the household, like you're taking them to your ancestors. It's pretty clearly that it's a human of some sort, whether it's the living master or if it's the household because they're joining them. So that's one example, but it's pretty rare. Yeah.
That sounds like in the New Testament, Kurios, because Kurios, we would say, is Jesus, right, as the Lord, but there can be a human Kurios, which would be just a ruler or a master if they had a servant or bond servant. So in that
Mm-hmm.
case, it will be Kurios with smaller k compared to
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, who is the capital Kurios, like the Lord, or we would say, oh, he's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So this sounds almost like these Elohim human masses in this context that you're mentioning would maybe resemble curious lords and masses in the New Testament, not just in the New Testament, in Greek world, the ancient Greek world in general.
Yeah, like it could have sort of a semantic meaning of master, ruler, lord, that sort of thing. We do the same thing. We do it later. Like you said, we have the Lord Jesus Christ. You could have another Lord that's just an earthly king. It's sort of a sign of respect, that sort of thing, right? But you get that. This is where I think function comes in. And I want to talk about that when we get to the use of verse 6 and verse 7. We kind of want to pin this on a person, but what if we pin it on a role more so? Is there a way we can kind of account for both? Yeah, I won't revisit too many other commentaries because the people I had kind of say the same thing. There's sort of a balance of, hey, are these all a bunch of divine, spiritual people? Are these human people and they lean towards human because of the New Testament quote of it? Or is something else going on here? And because of the context and because of the how much cultural stuff from the ancient world they bring in, that's sort of where they divide it. And they're because of the cultural stuff, they're kind of all over the place. So if we go back to the idea of some kind of ruler, certainly God, Yahweh, Elohim, is making a ruling here, and he says, "How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked?" He wants things to be in a righteous state, in a state of good justice. And is he pausing to make them think about it? Is he pausing before he gives a verdict? There's sort of a pregnant pause built into the psalm here. And then they go on to say, and I don't think this needs a lot of explanation, give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. I see in that you see some of the commandments, the laws from Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Take care of the orphan and the widow. When you harvest your fields, don't harvest everything. Leave something for the destitute to go collect themselves. And fast forward to the New Testament, Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. It's all right there. It's the same idea, right? This is how God shows justice. Even oh, I should know this. Nico, help me out. Prophet, and he goes on to say, I don't really want your sacrifices. They're empty to me. I want justice and mercy. That's Hosea 6:6. Yeah. So, yeah. So it's that kind of idea, right? That we're getting in there. This is really what God has purposed the whole time. But something is happening here now in the divine council where God has to lay this out. We're a little unclear what's triggered it, um, but that's what he's setting up there. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can cover this mini section between verses 2 and 5 because they're all about warning these rulers about, I don't know if we should use the word social justice, but in a biblical way, in a proper, solid, sound biblical way, social justice was being put down. So the poor and the needy were neglected. So I can read just summarizing verses 2 to 5, unless you want to talk more and I can wait. I have no problem with that. Okay. So John Galdingay summarizes verses 2 to 5. He says, the psalm turns to upbraid those who exercise authority in the world because they do so in a way that favors the wicked at the expense of the needy. The verbs are plural. The addressees are human authorities. The point would be that they had better realized that in heaven a judgment court is convening, and they had better change their ways. But verses 6 to 7 will explicitly address the gods of verse 1. The gods are expected to identify with the principles that Yahweh believes in, expects human beings to live by. The presupposition is that the gods share in responsibility for the proper supervision of life in the world under God but above earthly authorities. In light of the fact that God is standing to give judgment in the cabinet, the psalmist points out that the gods would be wise to consider their position. The way to exercise authority without wickedness is to exercise it for the poor and the orphan. I'm always, whenever I see honestly verses like this, or like in Hosea about social justice, again the proper biblical, social justice. I'm reminded what James says. What is the pure religion? To take care of the orphans, the poor, the needy. It's beautiful how how both testaments parallel and complement each other so beautifully by doing these things, taking care of the poor and needy and standing for them, proposing their justice, um, in a way, protecting them, guarding them, feeding them, you're imitating Yahweh Elohim. And in that way, we are imaging God. I won't say as small Elohim, but we're still imaging God as God imagers. The way to exercise authority without wickedness is to exercise it for the poor and the orphan. And I'm just cross referencing that with James 1. In a court context, that will mean finding in favor of them rather in favor of people who, for example, seek to deprive them of their land or housing or freedom. Might this is the question that John Galding is asking. Might the psalm be protesting the way the gods collude in or inspire the oppression of the vulnerable within the nations they oversee? Cross-referencing Amos 1 and 2. And Alan Ross is saying something similar. He says the judges were showing partiality to the wicked. God is no respecter of persons, to Chronicles 19:7. And so divinely appointed judges, or humans in general, for that matter, must not be either. These judges were particularly corrupt because they decided in the favor of the wicked, prominent, ungodly people. In verses 3 and 4, the indictment takes the form of instructions. This is a call for the judges to do what they were commissioned to do. Their oppression was probably not outright violence, but court sanctioned unjust proceedings that would take advantage of people who were powerless. And this is, again, so important to study the background and to read commentaries because they give us so much data and info that we don't simply find in the Bible. But these are so crucial for understanding the Bible in the proper context. Leaders, kings, and judges were supposed to defend and sustain the rights of the oppressed and afflicted people in society. Again, this is a proper biblical justice or social justice. The outcome of their unjust judging is that the foundations of the earth are shaken. The foundations refer to the order of society. If the indictment is of supernatural beings as well as human judges, then the foundations would apply to the order that sustains every society in the world. Paul, we came to the last few verses, 6, 7, 8. Is there anything you would like to say about these verses? Or if you want to still stay between 2 and 5, you're more than welcome to do so.
Yeah, I actually want to take a little sidetrack here before we read these because I think it bridges together and it goes with something you just said. So Golden Gate actually kind of touches on sort of, you know, pe beings that have been giving authority and then seem to have favored the wicked or gone. And it at least sounds like he leans towards a human component in here. This is a good place where I can say, and I think because of the way Jesus quotes verses 6 and 7, where maybe we shouldn't really see those as different things, whether it's divine or human. And we have, yeah, we'll have to go to another passage here for me to explain that. To understand how there could be divine beings in the presence of Yahweh with authority and that are governing human beings or human nations, we'd have to go through Genesis 6 and Genesis 11, and I don't think we have time to do that tonight. There's quite a bit out there. If you want to talk about, you know, the origins of the sons of God, the Nephilim, the Tower of Babel, there's lots of stuff out there.
Well,
The other thing I want to do is go to Deuteronomy 32 briefly, which is another big passage for the divine council worldview. And I'll read part of it here, but the idea is that whatever happened with these divine beings, um, in some way, without taking a lot of detail or a big excursion, they end up with authority over the nations. The exception to that is the nation of Israel, which is the Lord, Yahweh's inheritance, his portion. He's governing it. And at the time this happens, Deuteronomy, well, from Exodus to Deuteronomy, we basically see how this gets set up. And on behalf of Yahweh, you have elders and priests that are governing this nation. So what I'm saying is that maybe we shouldn't think about these things as different things, is the function is different, or sorry, the function is the same. It is a national governance, but that national governance is primarily being fulfilled by two different types of beings. At least that's the way I see it. And I think that's what we're told in Deuteronomy. So let me find a good place to start here. I'm going to start in verse 7. So this is Deuteronomy starting 32, starting in verse 7. And it says, remember the days of old. So we got to go back to history. Something's already happened here. Consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you, your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High, that's Yahweh, gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, that is Israel, his allotted heritage. So it's saying that Yahweh's divided people and made borders, and the ESV actually in this case is a good translation because we know now, or we have more information. If you go to the King James version, it'll say the sons of Israel, That was in the text, and there's a version there or a translation. It's probably not very good because I just don't think it makes sense. Who are the sons of Israel, and why did God divide them according to the sons of Israel to make nations? Like we don't see that anywhere else. Since the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls and some other manuscripts, and if you go to the Greek text, they get like the Greek Septuagint and some of the other Greek texts, it says either the sons of God or the sons of angels, which kind of the same idea. It's a divine allotment there, but another way, in any way separate from that is the Lord's portion, which is Jacob, and to me, over the Lord's portion are the elders, the priests, later the king and his court, who is put over the people of Israel. So the reason why I do that is because I think it's important when we read verse 6 and 7, and that's going to give us a context for how this gets pulled into the New Testament.